Dr. Nerenberg's Mind-Body Workout System.
Welcome, 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 my dear sisters and brothers. It's an honor to be here with you, privileged to have the opportunity to reach deep within myself and share with you the experiences, insights, and inspirations of a lifetime. At this point, that's 71 and a half years of life. It's a privilege to be with you. Thank you for being here. The title of today's lecture is A Totally New Approach to Education. A totally new approach to education. Now, that's a very bold claim, very bold. But let's start off by looking at our current educational system, and then I'm going to contrast it to the new educational system that I'm proposing, that I'm implementing, a totally new approach to education. And right now, in terms of higher education, you have an AA, a BA, a BS, an MA, a PhD, you have an MD. But we're going to focus on the traditional AA, BA, MA, and PhDs. AA, Associate of Arts, a BA, a Bachelor of Arts, an MA, a Master of Arts, and a PhD, a Doctor of Philosophy, which is, by the way, what I have. I had my MA at Columbia University in 1965, and then in 1969 at the University of Texas I had my PhD. It was a long ordeal, hard work. I was ready to retire after I finished my PhD. It was grueling. So I know the system, and I've taught at universities. I've taught at Barnard College. I've taught at University of California in San Diego, Palomar College, Columbia College. So I've experienced at the academic level as well as being a student. I've been a teacher and also an adjunct associate professor at San Diego State University. So I'm very qualified to speak on the existing system and on the changes that need to be made. Let's look at Associate of Arts to begin with, the AA degree. Now, most people go, well, why are we calling it Associate of Arts? What do you mean associate and arts? A person might say, I'm studying computer. Why was it even called arts? Associate of Arts. So the title itself, for many people, for most people, really doesn't even have any meaning. Associate of Arts. I mean, a very small percentage are going into art as defined by art today. Then you have BA, a Bachelor of Arts. The person said, well, what does having to be a bachelor have to do with my education? As a matter of fact, I'm not even a bachelor. I'm a married woman. I'm a married man. Why bachelor? I'm sure it had a different meaning. There's an archaic meaning to going back some period of time. But for most people, if you really think of the title, AA and now a BA, a Bachelor of Arts, and the person's saying, well, I'm getting my degree in biology. It's not even arts, or I'm getting my degree in communication, or I'm getting my degree in electronics. I mean, I'm getting my degree in psychology. You know, why arts? Why, bachelor and then arts? So neither term for people, if you really think about it, for most people. And I've been through the system, and that was never explained to me even, and I'm sure there is an explanation that goes way back. And again, it's just a symbol, a metaphor for the irrelevance of the current educational system, which is why I've come up and been inspired to present a totally new educational system. Let's go to the Master of Arts, an MA. The person says, well, Master of Arts, I'm Master in Psychology. It's not an art, it's a science. But like me, I have an MA. I have an MA in psychology. Well, it was really experimental psychology. A lot of my work was in scientific method. I was not in the arts. Master, okay, you can say I'm master of what I was doing. I had some mastery, but especially the word arts. Now, PhD, Doctor of Philosophy. Somebody says, well, I'm not a doctor of philosophy. I'm a physicist. I'm an engineer. I got a PhD in engineering. I'm not a philosopher. I'm an engineer. But yet it's still called Doctor of Philosophy. So I only present this to you to show you that the actual degree titles themselves show the archaic nature, and it's a metaphor for just how out of date the system is. So I'm proposing an educational system where there is no AA, BA, MA, or PhD, a totally new way of delineating degrees of knowledge. And that's what we're going to be calling it, degrees of knowledge. It's going to be DK, DK1 through DK9, but we're going to go into what that means. But at this point, I just wanted to address the archaic nature of the nomenclature, which, believe me, is a metaphor for the archaic nature of the whole educational system. Right now, I want to open up for any comments or questions that you might have on this nomenclature, AA, BA, MA, and PhD. I'm sure these are concepts that you haven't thought about. Many of you who are listening have one of these degrees, and I'm sure never even thought about what it means. What is your reaction to this?
Hi, Doc. It's Antoinette. I'm sorry, I just joined the call about a few minutes ago.
Yes, Antoinette. What are your thoughts about the archaic nature of these titles degrees that people get with the names as a metaphor for the archaic nature of our educational system as it currently exists?
Well, you may have that degree, you may have the title that goes with it, but I don't feel that exactly gives you a true understanding or a true depth of what this person's knowledge. Because knowledge and education is far more than just getting that degree.
That's always true. That's completely true.
And that title.
Certainly the title, you don't really know what the person knows. You may have some general idea they have some knowledge in that area, but we're going to talk about even what it means to have knowledge. We're going to get into that concept in a minute. To have knowledge or get an education. I'm going to talk to you how wrong those ideas are, totally wrong. Mary, what are your thoughts about the archaic nature of the nomenclature itself?
You mean about all the degrees?
Yeah, Associate of Arts, Bachelor of Arts, Master of Arts, Doctor of Philosophy.
So, when I started off in nursing over 30 years ago, I got not associate degree, but a diploma degree. It went 3 years and I got the best schooling from the nursing degree schools. Now the hospitals are requiring now, and they only hire BSN or higher for nursing. So it's
A BSN, a Bachelor of Science in Nursing?
right.
Okay. So it's a BS, a Bachelor of Science. Well, let's look at that for a moment. What does the bachelor, first, well, what does bachelor mean? Why bachelor? I mean, certainly a married person could be in there. What is bachelor? Sure, it has some meaning, but I don't know of anybody who knows what the meaning of bachelor is in an educational sense.
I don't know either, but all I know is the Bachelor of Science of Nursing. It's like
Well, look at this. People are spending one of the biggest investments of their lives and don't even understand what the degree means in terms of literal meaning. Bachelor, Bachelor of Arts, Bachelor of Science, Bachelor of Science in Nursing. The word bachelor, science we understand, nursing we understand, but bachelor. Same with Master of Arts, MA, Master of Arts. Where does the arts come from? Lisa, what is your reaction to this terminology?
Can I just listen?
Sure, well, please listen. I'll leave you. Okay.
Okay.
Hugh, what are your thoughts about that nomenclature?
The system in place.
The system in place. Well, I want to point out that it's a nomenclature, an archaic nomenclature, that's a metaphor for the archaic nature of the system. That's what I'm putting out to you, and I'm going to demonstrate my point, and we're going to move to a totally new approach to education. Now, let's talk about when people say, get an education. You've all heard that expression. You have to get a good education. Get a good education. I have an education. She has a great education. Well, what does it mean to have an education, to get an education? What does that mean? Let's say, for example, somebody learned a lot of information on a certain topic. Well, typically within a year, you don't remember most of it. 2 years, you might not even remember you had the class. So you had the education, and you lost the education. You don't remember it. So what does it mean to have an education? Now, let's say a person gets a brain concussion, gets hit on the head, forgets a lot of things. Well, they lost their education. So you can't say you have an education. Or you get an education. Or let's say somebody, God forbid, gets Alzheimer's or he has dementia. They lost their education. Person went to school for 50 years and has all kinds of degrees, and then they lost their education because they certainly don't have it. When you have that dementia or you have a brain concussion, you certainly don't have that education, do you? So so how can you even talk about get an education, have an education? It's an archaic term. It's a term that's inaccurate. It's a term that's very misleading. You can't have an education. Oh, he had a great education. Well, what if he forgot everything? You know, somebody might have just crammed the night before, studied, done well on the test. So he certainly had an education that day in whatever the subject was. He had an education 10 years ago in his zoology class, but he doesn't know zoology. You can't say he has an education. You could say he had an education. He knew that material 10 years ago, but he doesn't have it now. And so it can be said of most of what we learn. Not all, but most of what we learn. So you can't really have an education, get an education. And furthermore, certainly your education, your true education, begins with your parents. That's really setting a tone for what you're going to learn in life. You probably don't know this, but there's a school for presidents, for future presidents. You probably didn't know that. Well, they learn from their parents. We have 2 presidents whose sons became presidents, Adams and Bush. So their sons went to presidency school. Now, they certainly didn't take any class in presidency in this. They didn't say, I'm going to take a class on how to be the president. Here, the most important position in the world, and no one took a class on how to be president of the United States. Their class was just knowing their fathers. That was the class. The most important position. No one had a class on how to be a president of the United States. They may have experiences as a governor or a senator, but so they have experience in politics, but they never, ever had a class on how to be a president of the United States. But the 2 whose fathers, they learned there. They were groomed for it, their fathers, they learned from their fathers. And typically, historically, the apprenticeship system, you're learning from an early age. If your parents were in business for themselves, you'll be more comfortable in being an entrepreneur. Now, we have to look also of the goal of the education. Certainly, many people talk about, well, you need an education to get a good job. So you got to get an education, which is a wrong concept. The correct concept is there's an integration of the educational process. And the new system involves an integration of the educational process. So in the new education, a totally new approach to education, you don't get an education, and you certainly never have an education. There's an integration of the educational process into your being. An integration of the educational process into your being. Now, I want to stop with that idea. I want to see your reaction, whether you agree or disagree with the idea is you really don't get an education, you really don't have an education, that it's really an integration process, because you can certainly lose whatever you lost, both because of forgetting or injuries or dementia. Mary, do you agree or disagree, or what are your thoughts on that?
No, I agree. I'm not sure if I have any thoughts right now, but...
But it strikes a chord of truth with you.
Pardon me?
It strikes a chord of truth to you.
Yeah.
Okay, Antoinette, does it strike a chord of truth to you, or do you have some agreements or disagreements with that concept?
Oh, no, absolutely. It does definitely strike a chord of truth, and I agree with that concept. I agree. I think we get an education every day of our life in certain areas, but we don't necessarily have it for different segments of our life. I think we'll go through different segments, and we learn something, we need to learn it for that time. We may keep it with us, for like learning how to use a computer. Once you learn how to use a computer and you need to use it for your work or for personal use, you tend to keep that with you unless you don't have a computer or you do have an injury, like you said, or get dementia or something and you can't use it. But then there are certain things that you learn for a time, and then you you don't really need it, it kind of slips away. So, no, I agree with that whole concept.
Now, certain skills stay with us. I mean, riding a bicycle. If you don't ride a bicycle for 20 years, you get on a bicycle, you can do it. It's a motor skill that stays with you. Muscle is referred to muscle memory. You build up a strong body. You lose that strength, but you can build it up more rapidly than if you never had it. So definitely we're talking about an integration of the educational process as part of the new educational model, a totally new educational model. Now, when we look at education today, most people say, well, you need an education to get a job. But we all know, especially in these times now, we need even more than for people to learn how to get a job through their education. We need people who learn how to create jobs. Isn't that more the need of the times when you look at what we need at these times? Don't we need people who go through an educational process where they can create jobs? Doesn't society need that more right now? We already have, at this particular time in history, in the year 2013, so many people are unemployed. We don't need more people on the job market. We need people out in society who can create jobs. There's much more of a need for that. And certainly the system as it exists is not responding adequately to a crying need of society, whereas in the totally new approach to education, job creation is emphasized. You have comments or questions about that? Mary?
I agree with yes. You hear so many kids going to school, okay, and they graduate with some kind of degree, and then even in nursing, it's tough to find a job right now in some areas. And it's like, if you don't know somebody in the system, then you can forget about finding a job.
Well, there you have it. And the schools continue, without interruption, training people to get a good education, which we understand what a misnomer that is, get a good education as opposed to integrate a really active educational process. So you can get a good job. Now, as opposed to be able to create good jobs that so many people need. We really need a process that emphasizes at least that, listen, we can't get away from the idea that we want people to get good jobs. But certainly want to balance it with having people who can create those good jobs. And right now, that emphasis is not there. That balance in the current educational system is totally lacking. And we keep turning out more and more people investing tremendous amounts of time and energy and money, coming out with the idea of a resume looking for a job as opposed to at least thinking about how they can create a job or create many jobs by following their passion in life. So we're seeing that. So in the totally new approach to education, we're not eliminating the idea of creating an educational process so people can get jobs, but we want to balance it. We want to balance it with a process where you have the idea of having your own entrepreneurial spirit, pursuing that and creating jobs, and how important that is for society, how important it is for you and your independence, and how important it is for everyone throughout the world at this time, at all times. Mary, you're going to say something. You want to say something, Mary? Okay. Okay, that's okay. I thought you were saying something.
I was just trying to say something.
Okay. Yeah. So we'd like to be creative. So that's another aspect of the new educational model. Absolutely indispensable balance. Again, job creation and also getting a good job. Now, the idea of getting a job is also an incorrect concept. You get a job, very few people keep a job for a lifetime. And it used to be, before society was so mobile, you got a job, you were raised in a town, you got a job in that town, and you kept it all your life. Now people could be changing jobs, careers all the time. So the whole idea is get a job, but be open to a whole multitude of jobs and careers. You're not just trained for, most people are not just trained for one particular thing. They should also have understand, you may want to be changing your career. You may want. I've seen so many people, including myself, change careers. I've had 15 businesses. I've been a psychologist, a businessman, an educator. I'm in transition of going from being a psychologist to an educator at almost 72 years of age. So people are in flux, and the idea of getting a good job as if you're going to stay with that job. So getting a job or getting into your career, the idea of a static concept is wrong. It's an incorrect concept. You don't just get a job. You don't get a career. You may want to switch because your interests change, or you can make more money doing something else, or you move, or you get a supervisor that's really discriminating against you, and it's very toxic for you to be in that environment. So you move on to something else in a different field or the same field. So the idea even of you don't just get an education, you don't just get a job, because having a job is also a process. You're in it, and then you might do it for 2, 3, 4 years, 5 years, and then you start sending out resumes looking to upgrade yourself. So even the concept of getting a job or getting a career is a static concept, like get an education, have an education. It's not static, it's dynamic, it's alive, it's a breathing, organic process. And so we need to reconceptualize that, and we're doing that in our totally new approach to education. Now, what are your reactions to the idea that you just don't get a job like you did 100 years ago? 100 years ago, you got a job in a company or a store or whatever, and you spent your whole life doing that. And practically nobody does that today. So it's an incorrect concept. What are your thoughts of that, Mary? Does that strike you a court of truth, or you disagree or disagree?
I think that's true because, looking at how back, and I've been a nurse over 30 years, and it's like, I know, even after I left the convent, I had to look for a job, and, it took me a while to find my niche, what I really liked.
So you shifted around from one type of nursing to another.
Right. Well, I was stuck in geriatrics, and that was my specialty.
But how long did it take you till you found that you want to be in geriatrics?
My interest laid in psychology too, so that was quite interesting. So, I did find a new direction, and also in hospice. I always was interested in hospice, but, and again, even now, I'm thinking, well, I'm thinking, I have till 67 until I can retire from nursing, but, even before that, I'm even thinking of going in a different direction of career. I think sometimes it's good to get something new.
Something new. Let me ask you this question, because I know that you're an entrepreneur, and if you could make a really substantial amount of money, through, let's say, the Power Sugar, being involved with that, internet marketing and other sales with Power Sugar, and help people with their health and have an enormous income flow, would you remain a nurse, or would you go where the money is?
I would remain a nurse, but I would decrease my hours.
You would decrease your hours and be more involved with your role as an entrepreneur.
Hmm?
So you would decrease your hours by what, half?
Well, I would gradually, yeah. I'd say about half. I would like to go part-time. That would be great.
So you would cut it down. So you would expand into an area that, and in fact, you're not trained for, so to speak. You didn't get a degree in business administration, yet to be prominent and successful in business, you would do that. You would put a lot of your energy into that as the opportunity presents itself. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Antoinette, what about yourself? The idea of not getting away from a static concept of job or career, as in terms of also being a dynamic process, because we have to be open to the changes of the times and of the circumstance that we're in. What is your reaction to the truth or falsity of that idea?
Well, I think we all have passions as far as what we're best at and which job we would like to have. And so if it's just a job that it's there, it pays your bills, and that's fine if that's what you're at, where you're at. But if you're able to get into a job that really fulfills your destiny and your future, and you're really into it, and that's like your calling, I mean, that's definitely that's a career. It's not really a job, because to me, when you say a job, it's like you're doing something, but you're not really doing it because you love it.
Well, I want to take off right on what you're saying, because that's the next point I was going to come to. So thank you for bringing that point up. You know, in this distinction, you'll never hear it in the universities and college or trade schools, but I want to give you a nomenclature that will be very valuable to you. A job is something you typically do from 9 to 5 to pay your bills. A career is a job you deeply enjoy. A calling is a career you would do for free if you could afford to. You would do it with no money if you could afford to do it for no money. And a destiny is a calling you would pay to do. You'd actually pay to do it if you could afford to do that. So really, what I'm doing now is a destiny. Being a psychologist was a calling. I would do it for free. Heck, I have done it for free so often over my lifetime. But now I've gone to a destiny to uplift society for at least 1,000 years, socially, financially, intellectually, spiritually, emotionally, and medically, in every way. So I've shifted now to a destiny. Now, within the school or the university or college, the distinction should be encouraged to say, you know, we want you to seek your destiny. And I have several lectures on how to recognize your destiny. And certainly within the curriculum of the Nerenberg Institute and other educational institutions that I'm involved in, people will be encouraged to pursue their destiny and to pursue their callings, and certainly go beyond the job, because you definitely want a job you deeply enjoy, which is a career, but also because at the end of life, you want to say, I went for what mattered most in my life. I went for the dream. And to make a livelihood at it, to be able to pay your bills and live and help other people and support our families. This is the best of it. Actually, when we're serving our destiny, then what we do to earn a livelihood becomes actually an act of worship. When we're serving to uplift the world through what we do, serving our deepest passion, serving our destiny, it elevates work to worship. And that's something that should be emphasized, and it is not. It certainly is in the totally new approach to education, serving our calling and preferably even serving a destiny. Now, I awoke to my destiny at age about 67, understanding what it is to serve my destiny, and I'm trying to help all you younger people awaken you to that urge and to recognizing what that is in yourself, to explore that in yourselves, and certainly it should be a part of a sincere, genuine educational system. And it doesn't exist right now. It does not exist at this time. And that's, again, a flaw in the current educational system. Now, another flaw in the educational system that we have now, you study for a class, you acquire the knowledge mostly through memorization, and then you take an exam, series of exams, and the final exam, and you write basically what the professor, you study what you know, what the professor wants you to learn, and then you essentially give it back to him on the exam, or give it back to her during your examinations, during your essays, your exams. You pretty much want, you kind of size up the teacher. You say, well, this is something that he or she emphasizes. I memorize it because I know it's going to be asked of me, and you give it out. Now, when the class is over, I know none of you have ever had this experience in your schooling. I certainly never did. Your professor, your teacher, your instructor never said to you, well, now that you've regurgitated what I want to hear, you've given back to me on the exam, whether it's a multiple choice test or sentence completion or essay, now that you've given me what I wanted to hear to satisfy what I need to know about what you know, what do you want to remember in 10 years from now? What do you want to remember? What's this education really for you? Now, what does it tell us that nobody asked their students that question? There's probably maybe just a few in the world that ask it. I certainly in all my years never heard it asked. And I'm sure all of you who are listening have never had that question asked. Now that makes our current educational system fraudulent. It actually is a tremendous weakness in the educational system as it exists. Now, certainly in the totally new approach to education, the intention would be that the knowledge, the educational process that you're integrating would be with the intention of you having it for a lifetime. And if you couldn't see that it's of such value that you want it all your life, to be honest with you, I wouldn't want you to learn it. I would want you to see right up front how this is important knowledge for you over your lifetime. So I want to then get your reactions to that idea of knowledge for a lifetime and the importance of it, or certainly having the intention of, I want to remember this all my life. I want to remember it. It's so important to me. It makes so much sense to me. It helps me conceptualize my universe to such a high degree that I always want to remember these basic concepts. It may not be about specific details, maybe about really large ideas. Now, Mary, that's a new concept for you, isn't it?
Yeah.
No teacher ever asked you what you want to remember for the rest of your life, or what makes sense to you now that you finished your exams, did they?
No, they didn't.
And you're a highly educated person. It was never done. Why is that? Why, I mean...
Highly educated, but...
Excuse me? Why were you never asked that? Why would all the many professors, you probably have had, what, 50 to 100 professors over your lifetime of higher education?
Not that many, but quite a few.
30?
Yeah, about that many.
30 professors, highly educated men and women. Is that correct?
Yes.
Very learned, very proficient. And yet these scholars, these experts, never asked you that question. Why?
Why? Not sure why. Maybe it wasn't in the curriculum.
No. That's not. Why wasn't it in the curriculum?
I don't know.
It's because they didn't care. They didn't care. If they cared about your true education, what matters to you, you didn't matter.
Yeah.
If you mattered, they say, well, Mary, you've learned all of this. What does this make sense that you want for the rest of your life? If they cared about your education, they were concerned about what they had to teach.
Yeah.
They weren't concerned about your life.
Yeah.
Not one of them. They wanted to learn what they had to teach. They were not concerned about what you really wanted to keep the rest of your life. Not one of them. And I'm sure they were very caring, some of them, extremely knowledgeable, caring in their own ways, but caring about what? Caring that you learn the materials they want you to know, caring that you get through the program, caring that they can keep their job or get promoted to tenure or whatever. But what you will need for your lifetime, which will be valuable for you, there was zero concern. I probably had 50 to 100 professors over my lifetime. Not one of them ever asked that. They're a victim of the system. They are they don't. How much does it take to do it? To say, you finished the exams, you finished with my course. Now, before you leave this room, take 5 minutes and just write down what you want to remember in 10 years from now. Forget about the rest of your life. Even if they're a victim of the system, not one even thought to do that. How about you, Antoinette? Did anybody say to you, Antoinette, now that you've finished these exams, what do you want to remember 10 years from now or the rest of your life? Was that question ever posed to you?
Oh, no.
And how many teachers would you say you had? 20, 100? How many would you say? Just roughly.
Oh, gosh, I would say anywhere between maybe 30 to 50.
30 to 50. And many of these were PhDs?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
PhDs. Very knowledgeable, weren't they?
Very knowledgeable.
Very competent and articulate, weren't they?
Were they articulate?
Very articulate, very bright.
Very articulate, oh, yes.
Very bright.
Mm-hmm.
Probably very high IQs.
Probably. Well, they appeared to have high IQs, yeah.
Now, here, with all that intelligence, with all that education, and in the important position they were in, not one of them said to you or to the class, take 5 minutes. Now that you spent literally thousands of hours preparing for this class, studying, take 5 minutes for you. What do you want to remember the rest of your life, or at least 10 years from now? Why is that? How come not one of them took a minute out of their time at the end to have you do that? Why?
Well, the whole thing is after you're finished taking the exam, everybody uses this term cramming for exams, and all you're interested in is getting the correct answers. Whether you remember any of that 2 minutes later, it doesn't matter. It's just getting the correct answer, getting the grade, and then moving on to your next subject.
And you don't care if you forget it the next day, do you?
No, you don't really care.
So you can't really say you have an education.
Yeah, keeping it in your brain while you're taking the test, and then once you're finished, you might as well just, it could be gone that same instant once you turn that paper and it's done.
So how can we then say you have an education? You have this education. You got an education. I mean, if you had it, you lost it.
You lost it.
You lost your education.
Yeah.
So they never. But why didn't they ask the question? Why wouldn't a reasonable person? I realize it wasn't in their curriculum to ask it, but even it's not in the curriculum. Some of these people are really devoted. I mean, they've spent so much time and effort studying and writing and contributing. Why wouldn't they take a minute and say, students, now that you've finished, I want you to stay here for 5 minutes, just 5 minutes, after 1,000 hours of your time, and write down what you want to remember 10 years from now. Forget even your lifetime. Why? Why didn't they ever say that? What do you make out of that, Antoinette?
That's a good question. I don't know, because really looking at the bigger picture, that would be just a common sense question.
Well, I say they didn't care. They only cared that you learn what they want you to learn. They knew you were going to forget it. They didn't care if you forgot it the next day. They didn't care if you learned it if they forgot it the next day. They were paid to do a job. They did the job as defined. But see, the policy in my educational system, a totally new approach to education is, again, if the intention is for it to be an education for a lifetime. And not only that, I would want you to pass the knowledge down to your loved ones, to your children. Particularly certain of the information would be something I'd want your children to learn, your nieces and nephew, your parents, your loved ones, to pass it down. I'm not satisfied that just you got the education. What of this education can you pass on to others? Also, that helps you integrate it. The best way to deeply integrate your knowledge is to teach it. So I would want you to bring it down to a level that your young nieces and nephews can learn, or bring it up to a level that you'd want to tell your parents. You say, Mom, Dad, I'm excited. Here's something I'd like to tell you. You know, we put all this money into my education. Here, I want to bring back this jewel for you. Here, there's this. What do you think? Is this something you'd want to remember? So the whole idea is knowledge. It's not just the educational system as the new educational approach. It's not just a knowledge for the identified student. No. It's knowledge to be passed down over the generations, a certain portion of it to be passed along. Not all of it, but a certain portions of it, particularly how to deal with your thoughts, a certain health issues and prevention of disease knowledge. That should be passed along.
Yeah,
And so if you say, let's go home and you have a niece and nephew. How many of you want to tell that niece and nephew? Say, raise your hand. Somebody doesn't raise them. Well, how come you don't want to? Well, I don't want to for this reason. Well, listen, let me show you why you want to, and show them why they want to pass it on to their loved ones, because it's that important. Now, if you don't think it's that important, you're not going to tell them to do that.
Right.
So part of the system is educating others. And isn't that one of the best ways to fully integrate the knowledge yourself?
Yeah, definitely.
Now, I know no teachers ever said, pass this knowledge along, have they?
Well, no.
No. So they're not only saying, what do you want to remember in 10 years from now? They're not even telling the people to pass the knowledge on. Just keep it for yourself for the exam, and I don't care what you do with it afterwards. I don't care if you forget it 2 minutes later, if you teach it to somebody, you don't teach it to somebody. I don't care. I don't care about what it does for society. I'm just being a professor, giving you this knowledge, and that's my job. Well, it's not. Your job goes to, because I'm defining the function of the educational process to uplift society for at least 1,000 years. Well, the only way you're going to do that is you've got to pass that knowledge along. It's got to go to your children, your nieces, your nephews, your parents, your friends, anybody you love. You say, I want you to know this. I want you to have this. Listen, people who who truly accept their religious beliefs, they accept Jesus Christ, or they accept Baha'u'llah, or they accept Muhammad, they want to share it. They pass the knowledge along. They pass the scripture along. They say, well, look, the promised one has come. The Messiah has come, and here's the teachings. I mean, they pass it along, right?
Yeah.
They pass that knowledge along. Why? Because it's great knowledge. Ha! And the religious teachers say, pass this knowledge along. This is valuable. Pass it along. Don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Give it to your children. Give it to your parents. Give it to your friends. Give the good news. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So this other knowledge, they must not feel that passionate about. Here's some knowledge about life, how to make a living, how to deal with hardship and loss and setbacks and failures, and how to start a business. Pass it along. They're not telling us to do that. Well, in the totally new educational approach, we are going to be telling people to do that. So do you see what I'm talking about when I say an antiquated system of education? Do you see why I'm talking about a totally new approach to education, why we need it? Do you see that, Mary?
Yes, I do.
Antoinette, you see that?
Oh, absolutely.
Now let's take it a step further. Do you know it's very good that people learn knowledge and have answers? Isn't that wonderful that people can answer things? Some people ask them questions and they have answers. That's a wonderful thing, isn't it? Yes. But that's only half the equation. Really, students should be assessed and encouraged to ask the right questions. Asking questions, I mean, that's as important or even more important. Yes, have the knowledge so you can give answers to the questions. But part of the test in the totally new approach to education is having students write questions for a hypothetical student to answer. Write up 20 true or false questions on this material. What questions? Knowing to ask questions. Isn't that how knowledge progresses? Isn't that the source of progress through questions? Not through, answers are great, so we're not talking about not having answers. Wonderful. But isn't the other side of the equation missing in our current educational system of encouraging questions and actually being, if you're going to grade someone on answers, shouldn't they be graded on questions? Isn't it ludicrous not to encourage questions just as much as answers? Not to replace the answers, but just as much. In the totally new approach to education, we're emphasizing asking questions. Now, I was never encouraged to do that. Now, I did a doctoral dissertation. I had to start asking questions. It was hard. Do you know what stops most people from getting a doctoral, getting their doctorate, getting their PhD? Everything but the dissertation. They never thought how to ask the question. These are top students, straight A students. It comes to the dissertation, blank, nothing. Why? They didn't know how to ask. They were never encouraged to ask questions. A question, well, what if I approach it this way? Or what's this really about? You have to be able to say, what's this really about? What's beneath these things that are being taught? What about this? Or what if? They're not doing that. That's why you have so many PhD students doing everything but the dissertation. You'll hear so many failures in doctoral programs that did everything but the dissertation. Because there was a failure of the system to encourage the asking of questions. And that is practically criminal, to take that kind of money from people, that kind of time, that kind of anxiety of the students studying for tests, and not encouraging the asking of questions. What a disservice to humanity the current educational system has, and here now, a totally new approach to education. Mary, what is your thought about what I'm saying?
Well,
Can you see that you have to ask questions for there to be progress in knowledge?
oh yeah, definitely. Because if you don't ask questions, and if you just, if you're just listening, and sometimes people are afraid to ask questions because they think it's a stupid question.
Okay, now let's go beyond that. Certainly it's embarrassing. People will admit they don't know something. I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about a test where you're told to write 20 questions about the material. Not an essay, 20 questions. I'm not talking about having to raise your hand, call attention to yourself. Everybody in the class has to look at you. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about class, write 10 questions, write 20 questions on the material just given you. Write it down. That's what I'm talking about.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, it's not being done. You never had it done, did you, Mary?
No, multiple choice, maybe essays.
Yeah, but you were never encouraged to ask that. What about you, Antoinette? With all the teachers you've had, anybody say write down questions about these issues?
No.
No.
No, because if you're asking a question about these issues, it really makes you think. You have to really,
Of course.
you have to know what you're talking about
And
in
what-
order to ask the proper
And
question.
we weren't taught about it in elementary school and high school and then the so-called higher education, not to learn to ask questions. How terrible is that? What a disservice to humanity. That ends now with a totally new educational approach. Now, let's go to another point, another part of the totally new educational system. Totally new approach to education. Now, right now, the people that get the best grades are the ones who have the best memories, by and large. Now, I'm not talking about mathematics or logic, but by and large, if you're good at memorizing, you can cram the night before, memorize the material, regurgitate it the next day or the next week, and get an A or an A+. And some people have incredible memories. And you know what? Memorization is good because you want to certainly memorize the knowledge of people who have preceded us. We want to know that knowledge. We want to have access to that knowledge. We want to be able to recall that knowledge. We want to be able to recall, we want to be able to recognize it when we're reading about it. So that's valuable. So we're not saying there's anything wrong with memorization. But it's only half the equation again. What's the other half? Inspiration. Inspiration, learning how to read the book of your own heart, is a tremendous source of knowledge. People are amazed that I can give these lectures on such a diverse topics. They say, my God, how long did you prepare for it? I don't even rehearse these things. It's everything I'm saying to you now is I have about 4 or 5 notes in front of me. I'm going to hold it up to the camera. That's a little outline that I wrote 5 minutes before. You saw me write the outline, Hugh, right? He's nodding his head. Can you say it louder?
Yes.
You saw me write 5 minutes before the class. It was an outline, maybe a little tiny outline. And I'm coming up with points as I'm talking to you that are not on the outline. Where is that coming from? It's certainly not memorization. I did not memorize this lecture. I did not rehearse this lecture. I have not given this exact lecture. I've given pieces of it here and there, just a little bit. But for the most part, this is a brand new lecture, as most of my lectures are. Well, where does it come from? What is that? I did not read a book about it. I have not taken one class in education in my life. I have not studied one book on education in my life. Yet look how the knowledge and wisdom gushes forth in my words. And I don't take credit for that. Any good that anyone gets from me is from God. I'm nobody. Any harm that's caused is from me. But look, I'm showing you can read your book of your own heart, the book of your life. Somebody say, well, you don't prepare? What do you mean I don't prepare? I prepared for 70 years, almost 72 years. That's my preparation, my life. I look within my heart. I read the book. I read the book of my heart. The Spirit motivates me, energizes me, and takes me to new knowledge, to fountains of wisdom and understanding that I never, ever studied. Ever. As a matter of fact, one reason I can step so far out of the box and come up with a totally new approach to education is, one, I went through the educational system. That's part of my background. I went through it. But I tell you, this understanding that you're receiving is through inspiration, not memorization. I want to say it again. The lecture I'm giving you at this moment, brand new concepts, cutting edge, something you've never heard before, something that most people in education have never thought about, is not from memorization, it's from inspiration. Mary, what do you think about what I'm saying to you?
Well, I agree, especially with the memorization. You know, I never was a good memorizer, but if I did memorize something, I would forget it in a couple of days.
Yeah, but nobody ever told you, did they, that you can gain knowledge through inspiration, did they?
No, but I think that comes with and I think, you know, with reading and
Mary, let me tell you something. Nobody ever told you that you can gain knowledge through inspiration. Has anyone ever told you that before me?
no.
No. All the years of education, nobody said, you know, the memorization is one way, inspiration is another. And I'm saying part of the totally new approach to education is knowledge through inspiration in addition to memorization. Antoinette, has anybody ever told you that you can access knowledge and perspective through inspiration, not just memorization? Has anyone ever told you that, Antoinette?
Oh, no. Mm-mm.
Never. Now, when I tell you
Never.
that everything I'm saying to you is through inspiration, not memorization, what do you think of that?
Well, I'm a firm believer in that because I'm a lot like that in my own life. My personality is like that. When I'm inspired, that's when I'm like a sponge, and I just want to grab. It's just like I just want to suck in all the information and all the knowledge and everything that goes with it. It's not just memorizing, you know, an equation or memorizing a paragraph or memorizing something like that. That you memorize that, and you know, you don't really need it in everyday life unless, you know, you're, you know, an astronaut or something or a pilot, and you really need that technical knowledge, and you need to have
Exactly.
it with you.
Well, let me ask you this question.
It's
Antoinette.
gone.
Let me ask you this question. I present this lecture. It's almost an hour. Almost an hour now. I've enjoyed every second of it. It's all fresh. I'm not bored with it because it's all new. Now, when I tell you I never had one class in education and I didn't memorize anything to give this lecture, what is your reaction to that?
It's amazing because it's just like it's coming out of you naturally, and it's really amazing. It's hard to explain because it's within you. You have it there, but you never had to take a class to learn it. So it is inspiration, and it's life's experience, and it's things that have accumulated within yourself over the years of being who you are and the people that you've dealt with.
Now listen what I'm going to tell you. I have said in this lecture things that I never even thought of before.
Right.
There's several thoughts that I never even thought of before right now.
About that,
What's that?
I have a comment.
Yes, please.
I think it's the Holy Spirit. Please.
Exactly. It's the Holy Spirit. Now, if good comes out of it, it's the Holy Spirit. If harm ever comes to anything I say, it's me. Exactly. It's the Holy Spirit. It's the spirit of inspiration. If someone doesn't believe in the Holy Spirit, call it the spirit of inspiration. Call it the Holy Spirit. That's where the knowledge comes from. I call it also reading the book of your own heart. That's the source of the knowledge. And I'm telling you, each one of you has access to this knowledge as you open yourself up to it. And I'm demonstrating to you the process as I speak to you right now. I'm demonstrating it. You're feeling it in my voice. You're hearing it. The knowledge is pouring forth without book learning on this topic. The Holy Spirit, Spirit of inspiration, reading the book of my own heart, and you have the same access that I do. All of this is yours. Just understand that this is part of the totally new approach to education. Brand new concept. So now we're talking about degrees of knowledge. So you can have, people will get not a degree in A or BA or MA or PhD, they get a DK1, degree of knowledge 1, first level, second level, up to 9th level, up to DK9. Once you're at DK9, level 9 of depth of knowledge, then you get a board certified, you then become a board certified specialist in whatever the area is. Board certified specialist in management, board certified specialist in public relations, board certified specialist in longevity and anti-aging, a board certified specialty in health and fitness, and on and on. So we're talking about giving board certified specialists when you reach the DK9 level, depth of knowledge level. If you stop before then, you could still say, well, I stopped with DK1, depth of knowledge, first level, and you have that. I have a DK1 in management, depth of knowledge level 1 in management. So you have something even if you leave then. So that's a new system of degrees instead of the traditional ones, a whole new degree system. It's been my honor, my pleasure, my privilege to have this time with you. I treasured every second with you. I've enjoyed this time. I've enjoyed the promptings of the Spirit to share this with you. So I'm deeply grateful to those of you listening on the phone, on CD, those in the room, those of you watching on DVD. Thank you. I'm truly grateful.